Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Talking Feds one-on-one. This election related, but more profound, I would say, than that. We're talking to one of the nation's experts on polling in particular, who has coined the phrase mad polling disease. Mike Podhorzer is the former political director of the AFL-CIO and founder of the Analyst Institute, the Research Collaborative, and the Defend Democracy Project. He also, I discovered in preparing for today, writes a newsletter on these topics called Weekend Reading that I really recommend. It's interesting topics, straight to the point, and very good weekend, even occasional weekday reading. Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, so it kind of goes without saying to set this up that every new poll occasions breathless sorts of reliance and over reliance on news cycles on how Biden is dead in the water, or Trump will lose if he's indicted, etc. And you have been very thoughtful about debunking some of those kind of galloping reactions in general. I wanted first, though, to zero in particular on 2024 and why you think, kind of structurally, the whole fascination with polling leads to an overall benighedness, I guess, in the electorate about how things are actually shaping up, and if it is a horse race, who really is winning and who's losing.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. What I call mad poll disease is I think really gripping people because people do legitimately have a lot of anxiety about whether Donald Trump is back in the White House. And what polling does is offer the illusion of being able to tell us something about next November that we don't already know. And what we know, because we're essentially rerunning the 2016, 2018, 2020, and 2022 elections, is that it's going to come down to a very close race in 6 states, right? We've seen it in every one of these. They're not just the states that decide the Electoral College, they decide the Senate, right? If we think about it as Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and probably this year include Nevada, but for those five, right, that's the same thing every year, every cycle. And in each of those cycles, the polls that were done the week before the election didn't get all of the states right, right? And here we are still like 9 months away, right? And it's sort of not understanding that it's just going to be very close. And it's going to be so close that polls taken even after lots of people have voted in that election don't always get it right. Right.
So there's two separate points here. Yeah, there's on the one hand the very limited utility of overall approval, disapproval
Right.
ratings of Biden, because it's going to be much more sort of six micro environments. But then also those, because they will be decisive, the ability to actually use polling to analyze or properly predict all the things polling we think about for sample size, et cetera, don't
Right.
necessarily apply to these very special sort of
Right.
six micro environments.
Right. And it's the structurally the problem is that it's like using a magnifying glass to look for subatomic particles, right?
Uh,
The problem
it's really good.
isn't necessarily that the people doing it aren't using the best possible magnifying glass and aren't like using best practices for cleaning the lens. It's a tool that can't give the answer everybody's desperate for, which is whether Trump's going to be in the White House in 2025.
All right, so I am really interested in the state of the art of the tool, and maybe we can get to that in a minute. But let's zero in. Okay, so you make this elementary fact that we should keep in mind every time we hear a new report on this or that
Right.
poll. Is there anything then that current polling or the legacy of the last 5 elections point to so we can separate the wheat from the chaff? And when we hear, there was a recent one, for example, that I know folk that suggested Trump was ahead in 5 of the 6 states. I don't even know if that's targeted enough, because it probably comes down to even smaller subunits. But is there anything at all that's out there as a matter of polling that you think can be somewhat relied on at this point?
So from your question, I want to give you another illustration
Okay.
of this. Okay. So if you're watching a cable show and there were 5 political experts up there in 2016 talking about Trump versus Clinton in Florida, and one said Clinton's going to win by 4. One said Clinton's going to win by 3. 2 said Clinton's going to win by 1. And one said Trump's going to win by 1. The way we would all watch that is we would say, well, there's a difference of opinion here. And like they're looking at different things. And we wouldn't come away thinking we knew how Florida was going to turn out, right? In September 2016, the New York Times did a survey of Florida, about 850 interviews. And what they did was give those 850 interviews to 4 other very reputable pollsters and ask them what was going to happen. And those were the exact results they came up with, right? They were looking at the same 850 interviews with people, but because they each had different opinions about which ones of them were going to vote 2 months later, they came to different conclusions, right? So in that case, it's not about margin of polling error. It's not about data collection. It's literally, that's how much opinion goes into what people take as science, because it comes with a decimal point.
Can I
Right.
follow that up for 1 second? Because at least some of the things we learn seem very kind of bland. Likely voters favor Clinton by 3 points. Is even that statement clouded
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the
Because
social
it's
science, because based
yeah.
on how the questions are asked?
No, there's so much of this depends on the opinions of what the pollsters do with the data after it's collected, right? And not in any kind of sinister way. They're all trying to do their best to guess which of these interviews are actually going to show up on election day, essentially. And
Well,
that's
no, I'm sorry.
something,
Let me just follow up,
yeah,
because you're right. The better pollsters do more full-bodied things and try to get at different stuff. But let's say they just ask the question, "Who are you going to vote for on election day?" and they use the same likely voters. Is that and that alone enough to import this much play in the joints? Because of, I don't know, what time of day it is, or
yeah.
is it only the
Well,
ones who try greater context?
the other piece of it, we were
Yeah,
sort of starting with sort of why it's unreliable to trust it
yeah.
just on a methodological basis. The other dimension of what's untrustworthy is that human beings are terrible at predicting what they're going to do in the future, right?
Boy,
And
the social science on that from the last 15 years is overwhelming. Yeah.
right, right. And so think of, a poll that asked you, are you going to quit smoking this year? Or are you going to go on a diet? Um,
Quitting
and
smoking, something like not voting for Trump, you would say? Just
but the point is that you can
no, I see
see
it.
that,
Yeah.
right, that we may really believe
Right.
we're going to quit smoking, but if you
Yeah.
decided that that was actually what was going to happen next year, right, probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, now
And
all this was preamble to you were giving this very useful illustration as a way of answering the question, is there anything out there that actually is useful for the micro pictures that we need?
I think the one thing that is very useful about the polling that's out there right now, or that I should say that's accurate, right, is that a very big portion of the what I call the anti-MAGA majority has always been anti-MAGA and not pro-Democrat. And these are voters who, before 2016, were much less likely to go out and vote. And what this polling is telling us is that if Trump is going to lose again, something has to happen to reanimate them, to remind them of why they thought it was worth going to vote against him in previous elections, right? And that's real. That, like, no matter like what kind of, putting even aside presidential horse races, you ask people, do they have confidence in our institutions? You ask people, do they think the economy's going well? You ask like any of those kinds of questions and you get the same answer. Most people are like sad. Like they don't like the way the
Yeah.
economy's going. They don't like, since the beginning of the century, except for the bump during 9/11, 3/4 of the time presidents have been underwater. Almost right, there's just everyone is dissatisfied. And so it's hardly surprising.
We're a Debbie Downer of a country, at least
Right.
the
And
polls.
it's hardly, but so therefore it's hardly surprising that you do a horse race poll and you don't see the same thing, right? That like people are not excited about their choices. People, and especially now, like still almost a year out, I don't feel like very energized to tell the pollster, yeah, I guess I really don't like what the choices I have, and it's terrible, but in the end, I'm gonna end up doing the thing again, right? That's not how polling works.
All right. Let me zero in to see I understood. So there's one datum though that you suggest is valuable, and that is that at least 2016, the base of people who might be expected to this time vote for Biden was expanded because of people who were anti-MAGA or
Right,
anti-Trump who wouldn't normally vote.
right.
At one concrete thing that seems real is, will those people vote again? Now, I just wanted to ask the converse question, because I had understood that Trump had somehow been pretty successful in bringing certain new voters to the poll who also hadn't voted previously. Is that mistaken?
No, that's true too.
I
There have
see.
just been more of an increase among like the increase in voter turnout. Probably we've all been around long enough for all the like decades of people
Yeah.
wringing hands about how do you increase
Yeah.
turnout in the United States. Well, the answer is you make it a choice between Donald Trump and MAGA and the world we live in,
Right.
right? You actually have something at stake. And the last four elections, right, have been the highest three elections have been the highest turnout consecutively, since women got the vote, right? It's ridiculous, right? But
That's a
that's
really huge, huge fact that I think is underreported. I
right.
didn't realize that. Yeah.
And what, like, in a way that's like a very ahistorical, like turnout from
Yeah.
the midterms 2014 to 2018 went up by 14 percentage points. And going back all the way to Reconstruction, the next highest election over election increase was 7 points, which only happened once, and only a couple times as much as 4 points, right?
All right.
Turnout's always been really stable. It's just in a different plateau now.
Wow.
And
So your
that
Biden's book. Sorry, go ahead.
no, and that's a combination, you're right,
Yeah.
of more people who like who had felt alienated because there wasn't anyone saying the kind of things Trump was saying, but even more new people who were turned off by it,
Got
right?
it.
And so to really zero in on, I think where you're going, that's an important point. Remember that Clinton beat Trump in the national vote by about 2 points. Among the people who voted in 2016 and 2020, Biden only won them by the same 2 points. He won the voters who didn't vote in 2016 by about a dozen points, right? And that dozen points among the people who didn't vote in 2016 lifted him from Clinton's 2 points to his 4.5 points, right? And
That's a phenomenal. And does it dovetail, basically, Mike, with what you do see as sort of conventional wisdom among the pollsters, like suburban soccer moms,
yeah,
or or in fact, is it just a sort of motley group of, if we could zero in on the people who didn't vote in 2016, voted in 2020, can we make demographic or other kinds of generalizations about them?
I think demographic that part, then this is where I think another aspect of mad poll disease comes in, right? If you could imagine a world in which we didn't have this constant stream of information about people's demographic groups, it would be obvious that like what the country's divided by and what the election is about are people who are for or against MAGA. And that is what, like, whatever demographic you're in, it's your values, it's your neighborhood, it's your upbringing that leads you to either be turned off by him or attracted to him. But mathematically, you get added up in your demographic group and then made to seem that it's the demographic group that matters, right? That that the percentage of people who are soccer moms who are for, say, Biden is a reflection of how many people with those values happen to be soccer moms, not that there's something soccer mommy
Right, right.
that makes you vote for Biden,
And more
right?
generally, not that it's exactly age or race. I think you're sort of suggesting it's kind of, I don't know, where you grew up and how your
Right,
parents raised you.
exactly. And
Yeah,
that's what polling really
yeah.
has, where it's like made us less intelligent than we used to be. Because we used to understand that people in different parts of the country felt had different values and partisanship, right? And from different communities. And now we ignore that entirely and instead attribute it all to demographics, right? And so it lets us miss that the people in blue states where there are a lot of, non-college white voters, right? They, for the last 3 elections, have voted for Democrats by 24 points. And the people in red states, where there are a lot of college educated people, have voted for Trump and Romney by a dozen or more points.
Including the college educated. Yeah.
Right. That's what you're right. That
Yeah.
a non-college white person in a blue state supported Biden more than a white college person did in a red state, right? Really sort of get your head around that, right? That you just
Honestly, please repeat that sentence. Please, I'm going to absorb it, and I want viewers to absorb. Just please repeat
right,
it.
that right. If you looked at a white non-college voter who comes from a blue state, and you looked at a white college voter who came from a red state, right now, if I asked you which one's the Biden supporter and which one's the Trump supporter, you'd say that non-college guy was the Trump supporter and the college guy was the Biden supporter. And it's the opposite, right? The percentage of white non-college voters in blue states who supported Biden is greater than the percentage of white college voters in red states who supported Biden, right? Because it's not that those factors have nothing to do with it. It's that the overriding, the big variable in all of this is that we are living in two different ways in this broader nation. And those values are contagious. And there's just a different vision and direction that people in different parts of the country want to go in, right? And if we were having this conversation in, say, 1859, right, it like there'd be no reason for you to have me on because it doesn't take a genius to tell you
Yes or
that,
no on
like,
slavery? Yeah.
right, right. But if you'd had polling back then, you
Right.
might have been able to say, well, actually, the country's really divided between people who finished high school and haven't, or something
Yes, yes.
like that.
This is hugely illuminating, I think, and I guess what it suggests also in particular about the half a dozen or so pivotal states is there one in which the values and community driven factors are either fluid or protean or just somehow up for grabs who's winning the school board or whatever in a way that's not the case in the main regions of the country.
Well, but even
Oh,
there, those 6 states really play out as, like, sort of fractally for the what I'm talking about.
yeah,
It's just that in those 6 states, the red and blue vision for America are in about equipoise.
yeah, yeah,
And so instead of thinking of Wisconsin, for example, as a place that's kind of in the middle on all this stuff, think about Madison, Milwaukee versus,
yes.
the rural parts of the state, right?
And I'm from Pennsylvania. I was law enforcement there, and the old bromide there is
Yeah,
Pennsylvania's
exactly.
Pittsburgh to the
Right,
west, Philadelphia to the east, Alabama in between.
right.
Um, wow, Mike, this is I would like if you would let me to talk to you again on this whole broader topic of the two Americas, as it were. This is a very much to digest for now and very useful. So I'll maybe we'll wrap up this conversation, but sometime in the next few months we could have
Sure,
a follow up on those broader terms.
happy to.
All right, thank you so much for being with us, everybody. Check out Weekend Reading. It's these kinds of ideas, but as they're playing out, in real time and what's happening this week or that. And if nothing else, I think it could allay, calm your nerves about if you're nervous about Trump, about over reliance on the latest polling result. Anyway, thanks so much for being with us, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Likewise, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.